The next, I'm going to put the calling David Seymour.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the ACT Party in support of this bill, and I have to say I've kind of warmed to Mr. Rafe's bill throughout the process of passing it. Of course, I maintain my earlier position that it is a completely pointless bill. Because just this afternoon I was reading and preparing information to be released proactively in one of my portfolios for all the world to see, and at the second reading I showed the House just how many piles of that information have already been released. And of course any member who had any kind of gumption could OIA either the Minister for Regulatory Reform or the Minister for Education for any official activity which I've had assigned to me. They could, of course, access all of my official information through that route. So the bill makes no difference whatsoever to my functioning as an Under-Secretary. However, Mr. Speaker, the bill has become attractive because it opens up some very interesting questions. And sadly, my amendments in the committee stage were ruled out of scope, but I respect the procedure and traditions of our Parliament. And so, as a result, I've come to support the bill in the hope that it will be a launchpad for much greater transparency and more open government. My amendments propose the Judiciary, the Ombudsman, for instance, should also have the Official Information Act applied to them. Now that we've blurred the line between executive decision-making power and the Parliament, why stop there? Mr. Speaker, I think many people in New Zealand would regard it as being in the public interest to find out where exactly do the Green Party go when they have the highest level of air travel spending of any party in this Parliament. Where do they go, given that none of them have electorates? I think that's something that the public of New Zealand would have a great interest in knowing. So why don't we in future introduce the Parliamentary service to the Official Information Act, because I'd like to know where they go. Many of us, Mr. Speaker, would like to know where Dennis O'Rourke goes. Just out of curiosity. He probably doesn't know himself. If we were to bring the Parliamentary service under the Official Information Act, all members, including Dennis O'Rourke, could find out where Dennis O'Rourke goes. Mr. Speaker, I think that we've actually come upon a touchstone of what open government should mean for New Zealand, and I predict over time this bill will be a launchpad for many more members of the government establishment in New Zealand coming under the Official Information Act. Just to take an example, the member who just resumed her seat, people might like to know when she drives home and how she drives home. People might like to know all sorts of things about members' activities, whether they get stopped and breath tested, for instance. Mr. Speaker, I can see all sorts of scope for people to want to know more about how members of Parliament and members of the government establishment in New Zealand behave. And so I support this bill because it makes no difference to me, but it will make a very large difference to the tradition of public interest in New Zealand and to whom the Official Information Act should apply to. I commend this bill to the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call Catherine Delahunt.